One of the first things that drew me to Warhammer 40k was those amazing official army showcases. Two forces clashing on a battlefield, titanic war machines in the background, smoke effects, hundreds of units. I was like, this is incredible. This makes me want to buy all of these units, which is exactly its purpose. But it does look awesome. After building and painting 1,000 points of a few different armies, after getting all that excitement out, I started to realize that part of what drew me to those showcases, what made me so impressed by that imagery, was actually the terrain. It was the setting. It was adding the sense of scale. You know, 100 units on the board is awesome, but if you can't get a feeling for how big those units are in comparison to something else, it kind of loses some of that. The battlefields, the ruins, the alien structures, the utility pumps, whatever, the little tiny things, they add so much flavor, and it makes you feel like you're getting this glimpse into the actual 40k universe, and you're no longer just playing a game, but you're seeing a story, a narrative, a battlefield play out in front of you. That's not to say you can't play the game with, you know, cardboard boxes and cut out L terrain. Whatever you can do to get you playing is the right way to do it. But visually, I've always wanted one of those amazing game boards. When my friends first told me about Warhammer 40k in middle school, and they were trying to describe, they're like, yeah, you've got this huge game board, and there's hills and terrain, and you've got, you know, bushes you need to hide behind, and broken down ruins of buildings. What was in my head was probably not what was actually happening, but I want what's in my head to be my table. And then I look at my own meager table and the 4 L-shaped ruins that I have and a couple statues and things like that, some pipes, and I can see why nobody's signing up for another attempt at actually playing this game at my house. Ultimately, the goal of this series is to build out an entire game board that I can be proud of in my home space and have a bunch of modular scattered terrain and terrain pieces that we can play in a bunch of different ways. And when I'm looking at the board, I'm like, this is cool. This is a cool Warhammer 40k set piece. And for the actual board itself, I have a really cool goal in mind that I think will make a lot of you Final Fantasy XI fans very happy. But that is the subject for another video. Which leads us to the subject of this week's video, the Domina Ferrum project. Excited about the prospect of a project like this after they announced the re-release of the Sector Imperialis terrain, the official Sector Imperialis terrain by Games Workshop, and I was super pumped about it. And then I went to see the price, and it's cost prohibitive is the best way I can think to describe it. It is gorgeous and it's amazing, and it costs a lot of money, especially for what I want to do with it. What they officially sell is pieces of multiple levels of terrain that end up being like crumbled down ruins the higher you get, and you can buy multiple versions of that and have it not be ruins and just be multiple, you know, actual floors, but it would cost you more than most armies in Warhammer 40k. I think it was close to like $200 for just a piece of the amazing Sector Imperialis terrain. So I went on the internet to try and find something similar with an overall feel of that same kind of modularity of, you know, varying height depending on what you feel like doing, because that's part of what I loved and got so drawn to by the Sector Imperialis terrain was the sense of height you get. In looking at the pictures of that terrain with models, it really feels like you can get that overall sense of towering height of these massive structures showcasing the might of humanity even in ruin, because that's what 40k really is. It's scale. It's huge, massive scale. And I think that's what I've been most frustrated by my own game board of just, you know, a mat with a few pieces of terrain on it, is that it doesn't feel big. It doesn't feel like the massive Warhammer 40k universe. It feels like these huge titanic forces are clashing in a tiny village with some broken down buildings somewhere. I've got my one little outhouse ruin. It looks like a toilet. It's nothing. So I ended up finding Domina Ferrum. It's a 3D sculpted project by Terrain for Print. Links included in the description below. Definitely support the original creator. This stuff's amazing. It's incredibly modular with multiple floors, different levels of destruction, all the way from totally destroyed like ruins that are crumbling all the way up to totally pristine. I chose the middle where, you know, there's some battle damage, definitely some bullet holes in the walls and things, but ultimately it's totally still intact. I don't know what you describe this building as. It looks like a church. It looks like if you added a steeple on the end of this, it could very well be a church. But in the world of 40k, that probably means it's just like a corporate structure. I feel like one of the greatest parts about 40k is that you see these massive buildings with beautiful Gothic architecture, statues, gargoyles, crenellations along the roof, and then its only purpose is to like process rental spaces in the shipyards. Everything is so administrative, but the design is holy. I love it. But whatever its purpose, I realized I could achieve my look by duplicating the second floor and just having like first floor again, top. and ultimately lining up the sections of the building side by side, I could reprint the whole thing. It's a pretty wide building, so I thought I'd probably just print it once and then, you know, split it out diagonally and have like 2 separate sides of buildings for like a game board purpose. But you could do a lot. That's the whole point of the modularity. You could have it be this huge centerpiece building in the center of your battle. You could have it be pieces broken out as in like 4 different corners of buildings, and there's so much you can do if it's set up in a modular way. The biggest thing blocking me from achieving this project was that I'm looking at a 3D print model, and I don't have a 3D printer. So I bought one. This was definitely the try something new part of this project. I'd never owned a 3D printer. It was something I got excited about for a long time. You can't be in the 40K hobby for too long without somebody suggesting that a 3D printer of some kind, whether FDM or resin, will enhance your experience in some way, whether it's just, you know, little modular pieces to kind of add flavor to your models, or printing whole terrain, or printing models themselves. But it took me a while to get my 3D printer kind of calibrated and running correctly. A lot of people will probably have a faster, quicker, easier experience than mine. I finally found that like there were some little screws that could have been tightened a little bit more, and I think it was causing 90% of my issues. But ultimately, 2 weeks, 40 tests, and I finally found the answer. It just took a while. In any case, now I'm trucking out 2 of these walls a day at the quality that I like, at the speed that I'm okay with. It takes about 10 to 14 hours to print any one of these walls, so it takes a while. And it was around wall number 20, as they're just kind of sitting there in the corner of my basement and still printing, that I realized I'm taking on quite an undertaking. I mean, it took me weeks to get the printing dialed in, period. And now that I'm printing, I'm only halfway done the building. I've gotten a diagonal section. If I want to keep going, it's going to take me another few weeks of printing day in, day out just to get this thing done. But it's meant to be kind of an overall long-term project. I'm not, you know, expecting to finish it quickly. It's a long-term project. But part of my goal with this was, like I said, to make this as modular as possible, which means if I wanted to stand upright and not fall over, magnetization. 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 Why is that word so hard? I tried a few different ways of doing this, just messing around, not really Googling. I probably could have found an answer very quickly of how to get a magnet to stick to PLA material, the plastic they use in 3D printing, FDM. And I didn't have an answer, so I just kind of kept trying things. I tried Elmer's glue, which worked, but the magnets would sometimes just pop out because the Elmer's glue wasn't really sticking to the surface. I tried a mixture of Elmer's glue and sprue glue that seemed to sort of work, but sprue glue is not reacting to the PLA, so I think I just made it like a weirder material inside there. I'm not sure. And then I would try to get the other magnets in place, and they would flip without me realizing it. So when I would finally go to put the 2 pieces together, I realized that the magnets were repelling, and somehow I'd gotten them on the wrong side. That was actually really frustrating. It took me a while to get past that, and I finally came up with this process. I have a base template in place. Our magnets are glued. We put the new magnets on top. Footage shown here, I hope. Got rid of the Elmer's glue, got rid of the sprue glue, went straight to Gorilla Glue, Super Glue. I love that stuff. And I would put all the magnets down, put the glue in place, smash them together so the magnets are now in the holes, still magnetically attached, and just kind of scrape them off sideways. That I found was the fastest way to do this without any mix-ups. You can't do that unless you're willing to scrape your 2 pieces of glass together, which in this case, they're just connecting surfaces. That's totally fine for me. But depending on your purpose and what you're magnetizing, that may or may not be acceptable. It works for this. It's about this point that I've got a bunch of magnetized pieces of walls, and I realize I haven't actually started painting anything, and the daunting nature of the project I've taken on is really starting to settle in. But on we go. So I base paint everything black, which again is kind of like what I normally base things in, just so that shadows are still black. If I miss painting something, it's black. It just looks like a dark shadow. And that always is kind of an easy way to do this. But I'm then gonna paint it kind of a dark gray as my base. So I don't know, maybe I could save some time by just basing it a dark gray. I'm not gonna lie, this took a while. I still haven't even primed all of the plastic that I'm looking at. And my finger was starting to hurt priming so much. Holding down the rattle can for this long, I was like, why does this hurt? It was actually exhausting. And then I was like, okay, I guess now we start to actually paint, but I didn't know how to achieve the color I like. So in all the promotional art for Sector Imperialis, it has this almost like cold stone that it looks like it almost has a level of depth, like a granite, but it's not. They're not doing any of the granite effects. It just kind of has that look. Maybe it's just the cold nature of the colors they chose. And I looked up how to achieve that and found Peachy's video. Definitely check him out. He's an awesome creator, and he had a guide on how to paint Sector Imperialis. I didn't have the paints he was referencing, so I kind of kept like looking at the colors he would show on screen and trying to match it with the paints that I had. I think I got pretty close, maybe a little bit darker than his overall look, so I could, if I was going to do it again, I might brighten up those midtones a little bit, or just go another layer higher with like a brighter white to really get the last bit of edges that might brighten it up a little bit. In any case, I'm happy with how it came out. And then I had to go do the gold trim. I just had to gold trim the whole building. It's just, there's so many sections. So it's about this point that I'm like, okay, I need to set some meaningful chunks here that I can call like a victory, a completed part of this project, or I'm never going to feel like I'm done and it's going to be mind-numbing. So I was like, all right, we'll do a whole section of wall, we'll take a break, and then we'll move on. Because the gold trim was a lot. I tried a bunch of different approaches for how to get the gold onto the building, and I finally settled on taking a dry brush and dry brushing as many parts of it as I can that are just big swaths of gold. Occasionally made some mistakes, got some areas that are gold that shouldn't be gold, but overall it was definitely the fastest approach. And then going back and cleaning up with the standard brush. But it's a lot of gold trim. You could skip this. It looks pretty good without it. The gold trim really, in my mind, adds that like contrast that you need in a building like this. But depending on your purpose of your terrain, you don't have to do this. But I mean, this is taking me a number of weeks to get to 2 sections of the building, and I think there are a total of like 10 sections. It's a lot. I don't know how I'm gonna realistically finish in any meaningful amount of time. I think I just have to sort of like set aside every once in a while, just be like, we're doing a section of a building today, and just kind of go for it, and then mostly just leave it be for a while, because I'm gonna lose my mind if I just try to go from 0 to totally done with this whole building. If you guys have any suggestions on how to speed up the trim, I think it's definitely one of the pieces that is taking the longest. I've tried a couple different approaches. I can't figure out how I would airbrush it without a ton of masking, and at that point I'm like, what am I saving time with if I'm just masking the whole building anyway? I think adding some thin washes or oils or something light to kind of add to a couple little areas to show some grime or some building bleed, whatever that color is, whenever there's like a bullet hole and then stuff just like leaks out. I guess it's just like plaster then like rotting away. Ultimately for me though, I think the magic of pieces like this are in the fine details, rusted pipes, the crumbling skull reliefs actually being a bone color, so it feels like it's like, that wasn't a statue, those are skulls. Actually doing some object source lighting on the harsh industrial lights that are built into the sides of these buildings. I think that's such a cool element of 40K, is that like, you've got this beautiful Gothic architecture, and then this like construction zone light just slammed on the side of the building, and I'm like, that's so awesome. Again, without painting those elements, it's fine. It looks great. I think it looks like a really cool piece of terrain, and especially if it's going to be as big as I want it to be, it's going to take me forever to finish. So like, it's probably worth it to just leave it like this. But I love those little pieces, and I'll probably go back and do it at some point. At this point, really, it's fine. It's great. I think you could play like this, feel happy about it, especially because it's going to be so big. If you actually did the whole building, even just 2 floors, you could walk away and be like, that's a really cool looking building, because when it's so big, all the details kind of blend together. But really going in and adding those details, I think brings those pieces of terrain to life and could really draw me into the setting the way that those awesome dioramas and showcases did back when I was getting into the hobby. But decide at what point you feel good about your terrain. It's just about having fun. I want to take this as far as it can go. If you're interested in seeing more of this project play out, let me know in the comments below what you liked or didn't like about this video, or the way that I approach terrain. If you have some advice on how I could speed up my process, let me know. I'm always looking for different ways that I could make this go faster. I obviously have a ton of pieces left and other things that I'm trying to do with painting, so this isn't the only thing that I'm doing. I need to do other stuff too. As I mentioned in my other videos, if you're interested in helping to learn how to actually play 40K, Necromunda, Killteam through Tabletop Simulator, definitely reach out and let me know. I'm very interested, and I would love to do it with somebody who's like, interested in the channel, and we have to possibly Final Fantasy XI shared background together. Otherwise, keep hobby and keep painting, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace. Like many others, one of the first things that drew me into Warhammer 40K was those One of the first things that drew me to This one's starting off well. One of the first things that drew me to Warhammer 40k was those